happening anymore. I mean, there was an IMF article, just a few weeks ago saying there's no turning back. Like, this is the only way. Central bank digital currencies, like, they're basically saying it. They're coming.
Digital pounds would be a new form of digital money.
I am going to pay Paul the $500 I owe him using central bank digital currency Jamdex.
Do you want them able to program you on it to limit how you spend it?
You could have, as I argue in my book, a potentially better and some people might see it as a darker world where the government decides that units of central bank money can be used to purchase some things, but not other things that it deems less desirable.
I certainly don't. The central bank digital currency will make all of that perfectly possible with the greatest loss of financial freedom we've ever experienced.
When we talk about the false prophet in a few moments, you'll learn that his strategy for gaining control of the world is to provide a license for everybody to basically be alive. We call it the mark of the beast, but basically this license was set up to control the economy of the world, and the way you qualified to be able to eat and sell and buy and all of that was to worship the beast, who is the Antichrist, the beast from the sea. And so that's where we get the mark of the beast, and he gains control over all the world. Here's the key thing that he does. He makes a covenant with Israel at the beginning of his career, and he promises to protect them from all of their Arabic enemies. And so Israel goes back home, and they kind of disarm. They use all of their inventiveness and try to rebuild their economy. Yeah. And the Bible says while they're at peace, he comes in and he breaks the covenant that he had made with them.
So the peace treaty is negated.
At the end of 3.5 years, he comes in and he violates their temple. He comes in and he destroys. See, when he makes the covenant, he says, you can continue your worship. At the end of the 3.5 years, he says, that's it, no more. I'm going to be worshipped now. You don't worship anymore. And in what the Bible calls the abomination of desolation, the Antichrist actually goes into the Jewish temple. I mean, this is hard to comprehend. He goes into the Holy of Holies. He removes all the furniture and he sets up a statue in the Holy of Holies, which is an idol unto himself. And he requires the whole earth to bow down and worship.
What degree of persecution does Antichrist empower?
You know, it's interesting. It's a very insightful question because it's not just all overt persecution. Just stop and think about it for a moment. If you can't buy and you can't sell, pretty soon you don't have any food. And my belief is that many of the people during the tribulation are going to die from starvation because there won't be any way. They will not be able to participate in the economy of the world, and they won't be able to eat. And so little by little they'll die.
So we embody the most cruel of leaders, empowered by Satan.
Yeah.
Who has now assumed control of the world.
Panicked would you be if you had money in the bank and could not get to it, all because the bank said your account was closed? That was one woman's ordeal.
I feel like waking somebody up today. In the year of 2023, you can expect to see the beginning of major bank closures. Around the time of the elections, the number one concern will be the economy. The housing market will continue to rise. For inflation on food and gas will continue to soar. There will be major protests because it will look like the whole system is getting ready to come down. For major food shortages, farmers will not be able to get fertilizer and resources to meet the demand. The world will experience this failure of this economic system. I'm going to say it again. It will be the world's problem, not just America's problem. There will be a rise in the CBDC, the central banking digital currency. More and more people will trade in their dollars for digital transactions. Understand this, that this whole economic system is getting ready to flip. and it's getting ready to change. For the New World Order is getting ready to usher in a new economic system where no man is going to be able to buy or sell unless they have the mark of the beast.
Here he is talking about the digital surveillance future and how digital surveillance is going to be going under the skin, sensors in the future. If this doesn't scare the hell out of you, I'm not doing my job, and you should find another podcast. I failed you.
We need to realize that humans are now hackable animals. You can hack them. A good two-way communication system, direct communication system between brains and computers, this is kind of the watershed moment. I mean, once you have a good two-way, nobody has any idea what happens after that. Well, I think maybe in a couple of decades when people look back, the thing they will remember from the COVID crisis is this is the moment when everything went digital. And if this was the moment when everything became monitored, that we agreed to be surveyed all the time, not just in authoritarian regimes, but even in democracies. And maybe most importantly at all, this was the moment when surveillance started going under the skin.
We agreed to this? He's like, we agreed to be... No, we didn't know. What do you... What?
Right.
No, what did... You may have... I didn't agree.
Since being fired, then rehired as head of OpenAI, Sam Altman has doubled down on his vision for another one of his ventures, WorldCoin cryptocurrency. WorldCoin, launched in July, is a cutting-edge, if somewhat controversial financial network that offers digital currency, sometimes for free, to those willing to scan their irises into a spherical device. So far, more than 2.6 million people worldwide have logged their identity into the orb, despite fears it could create a potential privacy nightmare, according to one U.S. research center focusing on privacy issues. Altman, one of WorldCoin's founders, argues that tracking a person's biometrics is essential amid the increasing use of artificial intelligence, something he also champions at OpenAI, where his ChatGPT is leading the AI charge. Speaking as part of a virtual Q&A Thursday, Altman defended WorldCoin's eye scans as a way to rule out bots, saying, quote, "In a world with a lot of AI, knowing who is human matters more and more."
This is what they want. Because I just told you what they want. They want a censorship and surveillance future. Gates Foundation pledges $200 million for international digital IDs. Of all the other means of identifying and tracking subjects, digital identity poses perhaps the gravest technological threat to individual liberty yet conceived, said this commentator, Michael Rectenwald. Folks, he has this book out called Google Archipelago. Great play on words there. He's been warning about this. The greatest threat. He also says it has the potential, digital IDs, which apparently the Gates Foundation loves. It has the potential, listen to this, to trace, track, and surveil subjects and to compile a complete record of all activity from cradle to grave. I have been warning over and over and over and over about this. We are looking at a surveillance future so dangerous. Folks, they are going to know every single place you want. When this digital ID, when it's linked to all the other means to satisfy your existence, your ability to spend money, your ability to enter a medical facility, a government building, a courthouse, these digital IDs. You see how the vaccine passport, by the way, was a little trial run for this? When it's linked to all of this, they will have a complete record of your life. When you marry this up with a digital currency, so nobody can spend money without the marriage of the ID and the currency. Do you see they have a metadata record of just about your entire life, what you purchase, where you visit online? Imagine having a digital ID and them using it to assign into a computer. There'll be no way to escape.
About this, a year ago,
Well, I think we've seen how important it is. And
let me show you, because I want to put together a show next year on CBDC and show what it really is. Let me just show you a couple of things I found here recently. Cut 11. This is a Dutch political commentator on central bank digital currencies, because this is happening all over the Western world. Listen.
If we accept the fact that a QR code grants us access to society, what makes you think that they won't link that to anything else except for your vaccination status? What if that green screen on your phone that grants you access to society turns red the moment you take a flight too many? Or you eat meat too much? Or you didn't recycle your plastic yesterday, how dare you? What if that green screen on your phone that is linked to your digital wallet that's filled with nothing more but, I'm going to say it, central bank digital currencies will turn red the moment you say something that the government classifies as hate speech? What if they can turn off your life at the push of one button? If they can do it in China, they can do it here. Ladies and gentlemen, freedom that is limited to those who do and say exactly what the government wants them to do and say is no freedom. It's imprisonment dressed up as freedom. And we need to see it for what it is. If we want to turn this around, that is. We need to wake up. We need to speak up. We need to say no, draw a line, and disobey these laws.
Now, listen, in Australia, here's a politician in Australia warning the Australians about central bank digital currencies. Cut 15.
Let's be blunt. The so-called Trusted Digital Identity Bill represents a watershed moment in Australian history. We stand at the divide between a free personal enterprise future and a digital surveillance age. If nothing is done to stop this bill, government will sit in the middle of every interaction Australians have with each other and with the world. And it achieves this in the same way China does, by creating a digital identity that forms a central part of a person's life. You can call it a license to live. What began with COVID contact tracing, vaccine passports, and QR check-ins will soon be formalized by an inescapable digital identity. It signals the complete end of consumer privacy, the end of citizen anonymity, and the beginning of a big brother digital age that treats the people of Australia as products rather than free human beings. The government intends to build a complete digital record of every Australian to be shared and used. Our medical history, our shopping preferences, who we associate with, whether our choices are really so-called green, social security, veteran services, travel records, website viewing, employment status, and social media comments. Everything will go on the record and be available to any large corporation that can pay for access.
Now, let me give you one from the United States. This is a member of the Minneapolis Federal Reserve. This is the president of the Minneapolis Federal Reserve Bank. This is what he says about CBDCs.
Central bank digital currency. Do you think that that is something that you all should be looking into seriously? To what degree should you be looking into it seriously? Just what are your thoughts on CBDC?
I mean, as my colleagues at the Federal Reserve have talked about, we are examining it. I'll tell you, my personal bias is I'm pretty skeptical. I keep asking anybody at the Fed or outside of the Fed to explain to me what problem this is solving. I can send anybody in this room $5 with Venmo right now. Right? No, seriously. So what is it that a CBDC could do that Venmo can't do? And all I get is a bunch of hand waving. I get a bunch, well, maybe it's better for financial inclusion. Maybe it's better for cross-border remittances. Maybe. Is there any evidence that it is? And, they say, well, what about China? China's doing it. Well, I can see why China would do it. If they want to monitor every one of your transactions, you could do that with the central bank digital currency. You can't do that with Venmo. If you want to impose negative interest rates, you could do that with the central bank digital currency. You can't do that with Venmo. And if you want to directly tax customer accounts, you could do that with the central bank digital currency. You can't do that with Venmo. So I get why China would be interested. Why would the American people be for that?
In the interview, you also say you wouldn't be surprised if at the tail end of when we see a major stock market correction, we could see the introduction of central bank digital currencies. Talk to me a little bit about your thesis there.
Yeah. So look, look, when COVID happened, the leaders of the world started in unison talking about the Great Reset. That was their words, not ours. They talked about it. And what do they really mean? They couched in terms of climate change and COVID and what have you, but it's really a great reset of the financial system. And, that augurs the question, who's responsible for the collapse of the financial system? I would say the bankers and the politicians. But if you're in power, do you want to take the blame or do you want to control the implosion? And the central bank digital currency is a form of taking over control of an imploded system. And so the goal is to get to that system where you can control pretty much everybody. If we get to the system, the central bank digital currency, we know, a lot of us have looked into this subject, they'll be able to control almost every transaction that you make. So your ability to spend the dollars, the fiat currency you currently have the way you want will be taken away from you. And it'll start slowly. And it'll be, we need to save the planet, so we're gonna, have a meat quota, and it'll just go from there, and it'll ultimately be a slave system. And my viewpoint is, you can't introduce that until there's a crisis and there's a lot of fear. That's how they introduce a lot of change in the system, is through fear and a combobulation of your critical thinking skills. So at the bottom of this is what's going to happen, I think.
Why do you think it wasn't introduced then during COVID? I mean, during the pandemic, right? I mean, what could they have asked for as a bigger catalyst or entryway to central bank digital currencies? Money's dirty. We need digital money. We can't have a spread of anything through paper money. I mean, do you think there was a missed opportunity? Or do you think that was just the start of planting the seeds of CBDC?
I think you have to warm billions of people up to this idea. You have to start. You have to move the needle. It's the Overton window. You have to do it slowly. So the first step was vaccine passports. Get people used to having to comply with a quarterly jab. That, if you go back in history to 2021, that was the plan. There was going to be vaccine passports ad infinitum. To get your normal freedoms, you had to go get the jab, and they were going to track it and yada, yada, yada. Well, what ended up happening was Omicron. The vaccine didn't work. It killed people. And here we are. That kind of all went away. And the idea, I think, was to do vaccine passports to digital ID to central bank digital currency. It was kind of a chain of events. And that kind of got disrupted. The COVID plan to get you boosted every quarter kind of fell apart.
Are you surprised that folks are not mainstream, is not speaking enough about central bank digital currencies? I mean, they're not hiding anymore. I mean, there was an IMF article, just a few weeks ago saying there's no turning back. Like, this is the only way. Central bank digital currencies, like, they're basically saying it. They're coming.
Happens when the world stops using the US dollar. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. We are looking at those developments taking place right now. Overwhelmingly, the US dollar is the reserve currency of the world, but that number is dropping, and now we've accelerated that pace. What they call the global south, which is essentially all of these developing economies. You've got China right in the center of this. They are starting to make some changes right now. I'm going to bring that to you. Understand the implications here. When we have the US dollar as the single reserve currency, everybody's using it to trade. That means there's this demand, this constant pull at the US dollar, which allows the US to do certain things that other countries can't, especially when you make an agreement between Saudi Arabia and the United States and say, you got to price all your oil, no matter who you are selling this to, in US dollars. They call it the petrodollar. This has been an agreement for many, many decades. And then something happened. We have these new developments, and that means your life is about to drastically change. I'm going to show you why today. Look at what has happened here. And of course, this is in addition to all of the other videos that I've done. If you're not already subscribed, then of course, please join us. You could see the BRICS, U.A.E., the United Arab Emirates, and China sign a currency swap and CBDC partnership. So we are going all the way in. Obviously, with the new BRICS, you could see that the U.A.E. has joined in along with other countries. And it is very important to look at what's happening. Okay, we'll get into that more. But essentially, what I'm talking about here, it's not just about leaving the US dollar, and it's not just about, CBDCs or some alliances in general. This is about an entirely new system that's being developed. After 1945, there was the New World Order, and of course we had the IMF, the World Bank, like all these different supranational entities came about. What was very clear was that the US was the center of it all. They were the center of all of these, and maybe in many cases they were funding a lot of that, but they were at the middle, they were the nucleus of this. Time has changed, and many of these countries around the world are saying, we don't want that anymore. And so you can see that very clearly with China, right? I'm sure you've seen it yourself. Looking at the new developments, of course, it starts to explain what we are about to see. And all these central banks, all these countries, they're going for this CBDC. They want the ability to turn the money on and off at a moment's notice. And so that allows them to do this. And certainly we are witnessing these central banks engaging with each other and saying, hey, let's do this like beta test. Let's make this happen. It's a pilot project. This is not the only one. And so we'll see a little bit of that here, but the currency swaps as well. So no longer are we seeing entirely US dollar based actions taking place. No. Now we're starting to see a lot of countries doing business within their own currencies. And that means that while we're not heading for the exits on the US dollar overnight, this trend has accelerated.
Now the picture has changed. Money supply is shrinking in the US. The money stock M2 declined by roughly 4% year on year in September. In the euro area, for instance, the broad monetary aggregate M3 is declining by 1.2%. In the OECD, the money supply is shrinking as well. And so a shrinking money supply will put downward pressure on inflation rates. And I would assume that inflation rates in the euro area and the US will go into negative territory in 2024. And then central banks will, of course, lower interest rates, trying to increase the money supply again. And I think the decline in inflation will be temporary in nature, unfortunately. Inflation will come back.
With the US now facing or having to make $1 trillion a year in interest payments, the incentive is certainly there for government to keep printing money, Where will this end? Can it keep printing money forever, or is there a moment of time in the future where everything just collapses?
Paul, if you look into monetary history, at the end of fiat currencies is the debasement of the purchasing power of fiat currencies. Or even in the case of the German Papiermark, back in November 1923, 100 years ago, the currency was destroyed. It did no longer serve as money. And we are in the process of monetary debasement, be that the US, be that the euro area, be that Japan. Central banks will continue to print money, and the increase in the money supply will push up prices sooner or later, be that asset prices or consumer prices, thereby eroding the purchasing power of money. That can go on quite a while, but history teaches that at some point it will become exponential.